Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar. Security customers have already caught the cyber wave. Integrators need to get their boards or be left on the beach. Dr. Stephen Main, CEO at TechMIS, is our presenter today. TechMIS is a fast-growing cybersecurity company serving commercial and government clients. Steve spent 30 years in the Army, concluding his career as the Director of U.S. Offensive and Defensive Cyber Operations in the Middle East and South Asia. He holds a PhD in computer science from the College of William and Mary and holds degrees from the University of Madras in India and the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. The cyber threat has come to integrators whether they are ready or not. Customers demand smart controls and devices, and all of these induce a cyber threat to the end user that integrators need to manage. This period of change is an opportunity for integrators who understand that cybersecurity offers long-term managed service contracts and increases their value to customers. Integrators who offer full-spectrum managed security services will prosper, while those who wait will wither. In today's webinar, Stephen will explore how cybersecurity fits into an integrated security portfolio, what cybersecurity is and what integrators are selling, how to approach and pitch potential customers, and the best strategy to build a marketable cyber capability. My name is Julie Rolls. I am the training manager with PSA, and I will be moderating today's call. I have just a few quick housekeeping items before I hand it over to Stephen. First, if you've not already done so, please mute yourself. If you happen to have any questions throughout the course of this presentation, please type them into the chat panel, and we will have time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. If you happen to run into any technical difficulties, chat will also be monitored for this, and we will do our best to get you back up and running should you have any problems. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Stephen.
Well, thank you very much, Julie, and good morning, good noon to everyone. As Julie said, I'm Steve Mains. I'm the CEO of TechMIS, and we provide full-spectrum cybersecurity. I'd like to talk today how security integrators can catch that cybersecurity wave. And Julie has outlined an aggressive agenda, but if you have questions, please jump in there, and we'll have questions, of course, at the end. Just up front, some housekeeping things to go on to what Julie said. Put your questions in the chat section. I'll try to read those while I'm talking and work those into the presentation. If there's something that I miss, or if I don't completely answer your question, please follow up at the end. And then the slides and recording are available at psaeducation.com. Of course, there's my email address. I'm available for follow-up questions as well today. And if there are things that you think about in the next few days, or when you're talking to your management team, question that they ask that you can't answer, please just shoot it to me there at that email address. All right. So, first, why do we want to do cyber? Well, number one, the demand is there. It's not an exaggeration to say that the threat gets worse every single day, and it threatens all sized businesses. It's hard to get real numbers, but probably in 2017, there were over 350,000 attacks in the United States alone, and many more that were not reported or probably not even detected. Because bad guys can sit on a network undetected for long periods of time and steal customer and employee data forever if nobody knows to look for them. So why do we want to do it? Because the threat is there and it's real. Number two, it sets you apart. This is something that not everybody can do or not everybody offers, but it shows that you're more future focused. You're tech savvy, you're more capable than the guy down the street, and so that's a great reason to do it. And then number three, it prevents you from inducing problems in a customer. For instance, IP-enabled cameras or DVRs. We just sent an alert out to our customers and potential customers on an IP-enabled DVR, a digital recording device that allows access to the larger network. So an AV contractor could go in, install this DVR, get it all set up exactly as the customer wanted, but inadvertently then open a door into that customer's network. So that's a good reason also why we need to be smart and provide these kinds of capabilities. And number 4, it's an ongoing revenue stream that that more than 90% renew their services, and you can expect probably better than a 20% margin on anything that you sell to a customer. So that ongoing revenue means an ongoing profit stream and an extended relationship with that customer. All right. So why aren't we doing it now? Well, fear of the water is normal when you don't know how to start to become a managed security service provider. Then it's hard to know where to begin. People don't know how it fits into their current offerings. We don't see the connection between what we do day to day and cybersecurity, although that connection is direct and compelling, and I'll talk about that specifically. The technology is kind of spooky. We hear stories of hacks that sound like magic, and sometimes they really kind of are. But in fact, if you break it down into its component pieces, the things that we are selling are really very understandable. We're not sure how it fits into our corporate ethos. How do the cable pullers and the barrier systems guys, mesh with high-tech cyber? Well, I'd say we asked the very same questions when IP cameras came out, and we need to catch that wave, or we're going to get left behind, left on the beach. So all these reasons make ourselves credible to the kind of polo shirt wearing crowd, IT crowd, that's most difficult to overcome. And we'll talk about how to do that. Okay, so what we'll talk about today, the 4 things: how does it fit into my portfolio? What is it really, and what are we really selling? How do we approach customers, and how do we build a marketable cyber strategy? Well, if you look in the center of this chart, you see the actions that or really as a representative sample of actions that we provide today as security integrators: access control, perimeter monitoring, theft protection, security procedures training, vulnerability assessments. Well, those things are exactly what we provide in cybersecurity. It's just that the tools are different. For instance, if we look for analogs on the left-hand side here, I show a sample of security integration. Swipe cards, barriers, fencing, guards, fingerprint readers. Well, those all have an analog in the cybersecurity world. Firewalls, monitoring activity inside the network, enabling systems to operate on the web, phishing training, and we'll talk specifically, of course, about phishing training in a couple of slides. So there are direct analogs, is my point, between what we're doing in cybersecurity and what we're already doing in security integration. All right, so really, what are we selling? Well, we're selling peace of mind, like that guy sitting there on the beach fishing without a care in the world. That's what we want to give our customers, is a peace of mind that they're not going to be surprised. Their operations will continue without any interruption. There'll be no unknown or unexpected costs. Everything is routine, stable supply chain. They know their risks, they manage those risks, and they want solutions. And those are the things that we would provide. So let me go into a little more detail on these things. Everybody has seen a chart like this with people, processes, and technology, or sometimes people, processes, and tools. And when all those come together, that's really the security sweet spot. That's when security happens. I mean, it doesn't matter how much training you do. If we think in the physical security area, it doesn't matter how much training you do if you don't have the right processes or you don't have the right technology or tools in place. By the same token, you could have all the technology in the world, but if the people aren't trained, if you don't have the right processes, that's just junk that's going to gather dust. So you want all of those things to come together. Well, I'm going to break down each of those bubbles there and talk about what we're actually selling. All right, in the processes area, normally we would want to start with people because the people are really the most important. But let me take it, kind of one step back and talk about processes, because the vulnerability assessment is the basis for everything. That's what's going to tell you, does the client understand what he wants to protect? A lot of them don't even know. They don't know what data they have. They don't know where that data is, and they don't know how to protect it. And so, that becomes a vulnerability. They don't know what training their people need. They don't know what procedures they should put into place. So that all is wrapped up in a vulnerability assessment. And one of the things that we can do is test their websites and their entry points against known threats. And I'll emphasize the known threats, because really most attacks and the vast majority of the attacks and all of these attacks that we've seen in the news, particularly over the last year, that, for instance, brought the British National Health Service to its knees, all of those were known vulnerabilities. The vulnerabilities that there were patches for, but the client hadn't put the patches onto their systems. And so we can go and look at those really known threats, and we've knocked out 99% of the things that would attack our clients. And then develop those procedures to minimize risk while enabling productivity. And of course, the best cyber protection would be to get off the web, but we know that isn't reliable. It's like building a fence, with no gates in it. Nobody's going to get in and out to steal anything, but you can't do business that way. And so we want to balance that productivity and risk, and then develop those action plans. The customer needs a plan for when things go wrong, and like fire prevention, you can minimize your risk, but you can never fully eliminate it. There will be a breach sometime. And as a friend says, if you don't believe me, you will believe me. All right, in the people area, what are we selling? Well, we're selling understanding and sensitivity to cyber threats. And let's look at phishing protection. That more than 90% of all attacks at a business start with a phishing email. And that phishing email is one that comes in with attachments or links that either put ransomware into their system, both their desktop system and now increasingly into their network, or puts malware that enables later entry. So it enables somebody to come in later and look at their data, steal their data, take their customers' identities, their employees' identities, their intellectual property, and take that out at will. And so what are we selling? Well, we're selling phishing training, both online and in person, to sensitize those employees to the threat. And then we should be selling repetitive training and testing. So periodically we send them high quality simulated phishing emails. They are actual phishing emails, but instead of inserting malware, they give them rewards for proper action. If they identify it and they report it, they get rewarded. If they click on those links or they click on those kind of dodgy attachments, then they go back for retraining, and emergency action plans. So practicing what to do when things turn south, and a lot of this sensitivity is just figuring out that they're at risk. We did an assessment for a Fortune 200 company, and what we found was probably the best person, if we were going to attack that company, was to go after the CEO's personal assistant, not the CEO, not the chief financial officer, but the personal assistants, because they've got the most pressure on them to make things work, and they have the access to most things. And if they say, hey, we need this for the CEO, everybody's going to jump. So that's the kind of sensitivity that we're talking about, not just for that personal assistant, but for everybody that he or she works with. All right, in the technology area, and this is probably the kind of toughest because there's a lot of different areas, but let me talk about those. That endpoint security, for instance. And what is endpoint security? Well, that's advanced antivirus. So it detects and prevents the threat at the computer. And what the type of endpoint security that we sell rolls back in milliseconds to before an attack. So if we see malicious software executing, we can roll that computer back to before the user clicked on it, and in that way prevent a lot of malicious software. Firewalls, that's building a fence that only allows approved data to enter. So it only has certain gates, and somebody's checking the data that's going in and out of those gates. Backups. There will be an attack. We can guarantee that sometime it will be successful, and backups will get people back online quickly. So we can roll things back to before the attack, and so you just have a very minimal amount of loss. And that backup is not just the mainframe and the servers, but backing up individual desktops so that the data that you save every day is also backed up and you don't lose that. System monitoring, finding the bad guys that are inside the system, such as crypto miners. And that is a new and growing thing. And that is crypto mining is when you develop things like Bitcoin. That Bitcoin, by its design, it's harder and harder and takes more computing power to mine or develop another Bitcoin, to produce that Bitcoin. And so it becomes more and more valuable to a bad guy to get on your system and use your electricity and your computing power and your bandwidth or that of your customers in order to mine those Bitcoins. So they end up getting the Bitcoin for free, and you pay for the production of it. And we're seeing more and more crypto miners as opposed to ransomware, simply because it's worth more and more to the bad guys. I've mentioned advanced persistent threats, and what that means is just somebody sitting on the system and watching all of the data and stealing it as it goes in and out. All right, so that's what we sell. We sell the processes to prevent data loss and react in case of attack, initial and ongoing training, especially phishing training that would eliminate more than 90% of all attacks, and then technologies to keep the bad people out and then find them once they do get in. All right, so how do we approach the customers? Well, there's no better way to approach a customer than to talk to your current customers, because you already have a relationship with them, and they trust you. And so talk to your current customers. Now, I've had a lot of security integrators that say that they know the physical security managers, but not the IT security guys. But many companies are now going to integrated chief security officers that combine physical and information security. So if you find that, that's the guy to go see. If not, then you've got to, get across that divide where the guy in the IT seat is going to look at the physical security operator and with a little bit of suspicion that he really knows what he's talking about and really understands. And we'll talk some more about that. The small and medium companies are most at risk, and so by going in and telling that you understand their challenges, you can gain a lot of credibility. The average cyber attack costs about $5 million. We've seen anything for a small company from $80,000 to $1 million, medium-sized company larger. But small companies generally tend to go under as a result of an attack, because they lose their customers, they've lost their data, and their liability that is involved. Uber was just fined almost $150 million, and it sounds like an awful lot of money, but that was 150 million identities that were lost, both from drivers and from customers, where they lost social security numbers, credit card numbers, telephone numbers, addresses, driver's license numbers, all of the things that you would want if you were going to steal somebody's identity. That's what was lost. So if you look at how much they lost, 150 million identities, they were fined $148 million. That's only about $1 for every identity lost. So that number isn't going to stand. That number is going to escalate, and I think over the next couple of years, escalate quickly, because really that's the only way that the market has to force these companies to improve their cybersecurity. And Uber too is what, a $70 billion company. And so a fine of $150 million, is really chicken feed for them. So I think we're going to see the liability go up. Well, another thing to do, of course, is discuss the challenges and potential solutions with that CSO that I talked about, or the Chief Information Security Officer. And one way to get that credibility is to have a good sub, a sub that can come in, can speak the language that the CISO or the CTO is attuned to, and that then by extension gives you credibility. And we always recommend doing a vulnerability assessment, but doing it at a nominal cost. And the reason for that is they've got to have a little bit of skin in the game. So $100, $200 to come in and do, a half-day assessment, which would be, talking to all of the key people and maybe dipping down to a few of their employees, and determining then what their requirements are, and maybe they already have a good system, and you can walk away. But generally, what you're going to find is they don't. So we think a nominal cost vulnerability assessment, or vuln assessment, which the CISO will react to that positively, I think is a good way to go. Well, and how do we build this into a marketable strategy? Well, remember, we're selling peace of mind. We're selling insurance. We're also selling deterrence, because if we look at all of their websites and all their entry points, and we close the areas that are known vulnerabilities, then when somebody comes to that company and wants to get in, it's a lot easier for them to go to someone else. And so we actually can deter an attacker, unless for some reason they want to specifically get into a company. And something that comes to mind is not long ago a sub for Lockheed was attacked because they knew that they had a lot of sensitive information as a sub to a big company like Lockheed. They had a lot of sensitive information, so they were a specific target. But most attacks that we find are targets of opportunity. They go out and find a vulnerability and then pile on. So we can actually deter an attack by selling these products that I've just talked about. I would say don't be afraid to get your feet wet by doing this yourself. Your company's at risk, just like the companies that you're servicing. And so just like you buy state-of-the-art locks for the front door, you want to buy state-of-the-art cybersecurity, and then be able to say to your client, yeah, we use this ourselves, and we think that it's making us more safe. So that goes a long way when you eat your own cooking. Start with your oldest and your best customers and use them to sell to others. Use them as endorsements to go talk to other newer clients. And I would say start small, because this is very scalable. That these things I've talked about can be put into small packages for small companies and large packages for large companies. And so it's absolutely scalable. almost all of these things are sold on a seat basis, and of course there are going to be discounts for a greater number of seats, but a small number of seats is going to be a small cost. If you can meet with the CEO and the CFO, highlight their liability. Boards are going to get rid of CEOs and CFOs and CSOs who allow a breach that results in fines or lost business. We saw that in Uber. They compounded their problem in that they had a breach. They didn't report it for a year, and in fact, they tried to cover it up for most of that year. So their CEO, their CSO had to leave. Same thing for Experian. When they had the big breach where everybody's mortgage data was exposed, their chief technical officer, their chief security officers, their CEO were all let go immediately. So that's a sales pitch when you go in and talk to them that they need to do this as insurance, not just for their company, but for themselves. This is very modular. That maybe they have endpoint security or they have antivirus security that they already are happy with. We can add phishing and backup on top of that without interfering at all. They don't have to buy every single thing from us. I mean, we'd like them to. We'd like to do that integration for them so that they just have to make one phone call. But if they say, "Oh, I've already got endpoint security, not interested," there's a lot of other things that can be tacked on, like the phishing or the backup. And then if you don't have the in-house talent, then bring in a knowledgeable sub that speaks the language. Okay, just like bringing in a physical security subs, you don't have all the expertise for everything from cameras to barriers to swipe cards. You bring in the subs that do, and that gives you credibility. All right, so to conclude, some key takeaways. Cybersecurity fits your portfolio directly. The tools are different, and the tools are always changing, but that's really no different than what you're already doing. You're already adapting in the physical security space. Cyber is a managed security service, so there's long-term subscriptions to products and services. You enhance your reputation, you increase your value to your customers, and as we've said, more than 90% renewal and a greater than 20% margin on everything that you sell. I mean, this is a long-term proposition. The number of cyber attacks, the sophistication of cyber attacks, and the liability for data loss is always increasing, and it's going to get worse. It is showing no sign whatsoever of slowing because we're in an arms race with the bad guys. They know that they can make a lot of money on this, and so they are building tools every day to get into our systems. So start with the current customers and build out. Use the relationships you already have, the ones you built over your career, and then use those to get new customers. All right, what I'd like to do is open it to questions. Here's how to get a hold of me. As I said at the beginning, I'm available anytime to speak with you or your management team. But I'd like to open it now for questions, and I'll stay as long as you have questions.
Sure, I did have a question come in, Stephen. The first one is, how do I find a reputable cyber sub?
Well, that's hard because a lot of companies say that they do cyber. A good place to start is go to PSA. PSA has done some due diligence on cyber companies, and they already have a portfolio that you can start with.
Excellent. What are some questions I should ask a potential cyber sub?
Well, I think the first question that you'd want to ask is who does the integration? Because what you don't need when you're trying to build this kind of capability is a whole bunch of pieces that then when there's a problem and the customer calls you, says, "Hey, we have a breach, we have ransomware, that you've got to figure out, okay, who do I talk to and who do I touch? You should ask that company who does the integration, and I think the answer to that is they should say we do. We should be a one call stop, and that's the beauty then of having a cyber sub as opposed to having this in house. So you've got one phone call that you can make to solve problems. You should ask, what do they do actually in-house and what do they sub themselves? Because nobody can be an expert in every one of these areas all the time. And things are just moving too quickly, and you have to understand your own expertise. So what do you do in-house? I would say that any good cyber sub would do the vulnerability analysis, because that's how they're going to put together solutions that fit the customer, as to instead of just trying to sell the one thing that they've got. So they should do that. But things like endpoint security, there are really some very world-class endpoint security providers out there. And for somebody to try to enter that market now, I think would be a mistake. So what do they do in-house, and what do they ship out? I talked about who do we call. I would also want to know if they have redundant service suppliers, because some customers are going to say, well, I like this endpoint security provider, I don't like that one. If your sub or potential sub only has relationships with one endpoint security provider, then they're pretty thin. They should have kind of reselling agreements with multiple, so they can fit the service to the client. I've got a question. If a company uses a third-party hosting, can we still offer products, or do they have to be purchased by the hosting company? If we use I don't think I understand what you mean by a third-party hosting company. Do you want? Are you saying, Rick, that that you want to offer it under your own brand?
How I read Rick's question is if he's using a cyber sub or that outside company, can they still offer products, or do they have to be purchased by the hosting company? So I'm not sure I'm totally clear on that either, Stephen.
Yeah. The way we do it, and let me just give you that data point. The host are. Okay, I get it. Okay, you're talking for your own data. No, you don't. They do not have to be the ones that provide the cyber products. If you want to add phishing or endpoint security, you can add that yourself, and a cyber sub could come in and provide those products. They don't necessarily have to go to TechLink to do it.
Okay. And then I had one more question. You mentioned IP-enabled components like cameras. How do I ensure that I don't induce a problem as I'm designing and installing systems?
Well, there are databases out there that track that sort of thing. I mean, the government has actually a very good one that will track that, and that's where a cyber sub comes in handy. That they could do that search or teach you how to do that search. If you want to do it yourself, to go in and look at components. I talked about a DVR that recently has come up as having a problem and opening the network to issues. Cameras are particularly. I hate to say it, but cameras that are very inexpensive, that are manufactured in China and marketed under a range of names, are notoriously insecure, and there are databases to go to government databases, particularly it's called the CVE database. If you want to Google it yourself, or I can send you a link, and you can do a search then on the cameras that you're installing.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Stephen. That does look like all the questions we have for today. If you'd like to review this presentation again or pass it along, we will have a recorded version of it posted very soon. You can find it by visiting psaeducation.com. Create a free account and get started accessing all of PSA's educational content. Thank you very much to Stephen Mains of Tech MIS. His contact information is still posted here if you have any more questions for him after this presentation. Please visit our website, it's psaeducation.com, to be sure that you're leveraging all the PSA's educational content. This will conclude today's presentation. Thank you, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful day.